so that's 11 a.m. EST. We're going to start the webinar. Thank you for joining us. This is the website Fast Track, elevating your nonprofit website in 40 minutes with Dylan and David. Besides just having some alliteration with our first names and also having plants that are weirdly situated in the same corners of the screen, we also have a lot of experience with nonprofit web design. And so we're going to kind of get into some of the details here, but let's do some quick introductions that are not super self-indulgent. And David, we'll start with you. What's your deal?
Thank you, Dylan. David Horn, founder of Ethical Digital, and we provide website strategy and delivery for purpose-driven organizations that include charities and non-profits. And we include really lovely commercial enterprises in that, but our main focus is charities and non-profits.
I love that. Dylan, Stephen from 118 Group, we do essentially the same thing, but we do it on this side of the Atlantic. So Ethical Digital is in the UK, and we're located in New England. So why are we doing this? Well, because we wanted to find a very succinct, direct way of giving as much value as possible to our audience around building successful nonprofit websites. And what you're going to notice throughout this kind of webinar is a lot of it is some fundamental best practices, but those are the ones that get lost. And when those get lost, they can have the biggest negative impact on the overall performance of these things. So the agenda for the webinar, we're going through design, performance, SEO, content, and donation. That covers a lot. We're trying to do a few tips for each, and we're trying to keep it pretty short. So let me start my little 35-minute timer here. We'll keep it. We'll keep us honest, David. All right. So elevating design. This is topic one. I'll take this one. Design tip number one: make sure your most important action is a button in the header. This is very basic, but it still gets lost all the time. It's incredible how frequently I'll go to some nonprofit websites, and for example, the one that we're referencing here, it's hard to tell what their most important action is. It's hard to tell what step they want users to take. Give, contact has the same level of importance and distinction as news and events. So never that, always this. I mean, that is a rule you can follow time and time again. Design tip number two: call to action at the bottom of every single page. Often, we'll see some websites that end with some testimonials, or they'll end with a blog section, but ultimately you should kind of bookend your website pages with a call to action at the top and a call to action at the bottom. So again, two very basic ones, but ones that get lost a lot. Tip number three, this is establish visual hierarchy with your content. So I put like this quick little scannability demo here. And so essentially this is some best practices on how to make sure that the visual hierarchy of your content is easy to flow through, easy to scan through. And so the first example here is poor scannability, right? Where all of these subheadings have the same size and weight and importance. So it's hard to tell what the flow of this is supposed to be. What's the, besides the title, what are the main content sections? What are the main ideas? Are these grouped together? It all kind of flows in this kind of standardized paragraph layout. Again, no difference in visual hierarchies here. Okay scannability, what you'll notice about this version is, you have the main heading, then you have the first grouping of ideas, what makes a great nonprofit website. Then you have a subheading here, a subheading here, a subheading here. Why choose 118 Group? Further subheadings. You can start to understand the relationship between these different content areas and these different ideas. We notice that this gets lost a lot on nonprofit websites where everything kind of feels like it has equal importance, and there's no real clear relationship between these things. And then, the better scannability, or the best option is to take some of the ideas from the second version, but also include things like lists and kind of fragment out some of your content to make it really easy to scan. So what makes a great nonprofit website? Okay, first idea is content that tells a story. What are some of those action items within there? So if your content looks like this, with big blocks of text with no visual hierarchies between your headings, you're making it hard for users to scan. So that's scannability demo. White space, this is, the eyes need some room to breathe. They need some room in their field of view to kind of digest and understand things. And so when you kind of cram everything in with different background colors and grays and images, it can kind of tax the eyes a bit more than you want. So give yourself some breathing room, give yourself some white space, give your visitors some space to flow through your content. And then design tip number 5, contrast. Along with the call to action, having something that stands out is critical, right? So on the left, we have donate, which is bigger. It's a bigger button. So, they are trying to create some distinction visually, but they're missing out on some level of contrast. Whereas example number 2, you're drawn immediately to that specific call to action. So 5 quick tips, call to action in the header, call to action in the footer. Make sure your content is easy to scan by establishing hierarchies with your headings and maybe using lists. White space to give people room to kind of flow through your content, and then contrast for your most important calls to action. Those are 5 basic design tips. David, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, nice. Thank you, Dylan. And actually, before I get stuck in, I'm going to pick up on a couple of those bits that were really interesting. The first was the call to action at the bottom of every page. And why I like that is you're leaving the user something to do. Like they've scrolled through your whole page, and now they're not just going, oh well, that's great, I'll make a cup of tea. They've got something to do, and you're kind of rewarding those users who have gone through all of your content.
Right.
That they should be your most engaged and your most relevant users. The other one was the scannability, which was all spot on, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on because it's also a great thing for search engines. Generally speaking, what is good for the reader is good for search engines. So that scannability, breaking content up into usable chunks. Anyway, perfect. Loved it.
Thank you.
Okay,
David.
so I'm going to talk first about caching, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what's involved and why it happens. And to talk about it, really, most of my clients are dealing with WordPress websites, which are database driven. And every time you visit a website that's produced by WordPress or Drupal or other content management systems, it's running a database query, and it's pulling data from the database, taking that data, displaying it in a template that we've created, and then showing it on the screen. And that is quite a lot of steps for it to go through. And so to reduce that lag, reduce that time it takes, we introduce layers of caching. And the first, or the most important layer that we sort of deal with, is this server-side caching, where we are taking a snapshot of the content from that database and taking a snapshot of how it appears on the screen. And the next time somebody views that page, rather than go through that loop of let's go to the database, let's get the content, let's show it in the template, it has it saved, and it can just go bang, here it is. And that's much, much quicker to do. Your individual browser will do something similar, right? But that's kind of stored locally, and it'll do the same thing. It'll say, right, okay, here's a picture of your website. If you visit it again in the next few days, we'll show you that picture. And a combination of that server side and that client side sort of helps you boost the performance of your website the most. And who's that in the background?
Got a couple dogs going.
Dogs going crazy. I've got 3 great plugins here that we use with our clients for caching on WordPress. The first is WP Fastest Cache. Super simple to set it up. If you're not interested in the technical side of it at all, install that, click activate, and you don't need to do any other settings. It'll do a really good job for you. A better one than that would be the W3 Total Cache. Loads of options. I find it pretty overwhelming, and I would probably change 2 or 3 things and then just kind of balk at doing any more and leave it at that. If you've got the budget to pay, I would always recommend using WP Rocket. I'm not in an affiliate program with them, although maybe I should be, because they just have the best caching, and it works universally. Whether you're, whatever your hosting setup, WP Rocket will do the job for you. So that's my advice on caching. Show your users a stored version of your website or each page of your website, because it'll be much quicker than having the database run a query each time. Okay. All right. The next one. What are we up to next? I think it's about your web vitals. I'm hoping that some of you will know a little bit about Google Web Vitals. If you don't, as a quick summary, it is their measure or their metrics by which they measure the performance of your site. And Google's impression of your performance will have a large impact on how it decides to rank you in search results, okay? And there are 3 main vitals that they are tracking. The first is largest paint, the second, first input delay, and the third, cumulative layout shift. Largest paint. Typically, it's the largest object on your page. It's usually a large image or a large video. And your job is to optimize that, strike the balance between reducing file size and keeping high quality for images or videos. And there's a couple of online services that I recommend for doing that. We'll send out after this webinar a list of the links and things that we mentioned in it. But for images, I use tinypng.com. And for video, I use Veed, that's veed.io. And they can do a really good job of just condensing that without losing any quality. The second one that Google's looking at is the first input delay. And now that might be something you have less control over. It is often a result of your hosting company that you're using. It is the time between somebody clicks on a search result or types your address in their browser and hits enter. It's the time between that happening and the website beginning to load on your web on the browser. And so that can be a result of the web hosting itself. It could be a result of lots and lots of external code having to be loaded on your homepage, like donation boxes or so on. So you might have limited control over it. But things you can do to help would be to serve your website through a performance web host. We usually use WP Engine. Other web hosts are available. But that will just kind of help reduce that lag. But also, if you can use a content delivery network, which distributes your content across the globe and just serves it most rapidly to whoever needs it, whoever's accessing it. So, okay, first input delay. Cumulative layout shift. And I know these are quite dry topics and things, but the layout shift, we've all been in that situation where we've pulled up a web page on our phones and we've gone to thumb a button, but just as we go to press it, the layout moves because the page hasn't finished loading. And that's called layout shift, and it'll be a big downtick for Google if you're not performant in that area. And some of the ways you can improve your performance here, making sure all of your images have width and height specified. The same for any videos. And anything that can kind of throw the browser into not knowing what content it's going to be loading will affect your layout shift. So really dry stuff, but really quick wins, really. Optimize your images. Can you serve your website through a content delivery network? And can you add images, image dimensions and video dimensions to your layouts? Okay, I'm going to take a drink of water whilst Dylan, you line up the next slide for me.
Yes, and just input here. You mentioned it's dry. I mean, it's mostly dry because it's very technical. And I think that even if you don't feel like, you're listening to this and you're like, I wouldn't know the first thing about how to execute this, you at least can be conversant with your partner, your website, your web partner in these different areas to understand, are they doing these things? If they're not, why? It at least gives you some tools to communicate some of these things that you might not have had before. So it is dry, it is technical, it might not be within your realm of execution, but it gives you the tools you need to kind of communicate with your partner.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the language and it's the things to be looking out for. If you have to pass, in this case, accessibility audits, or if you have to pass, certain benchmarks for your website performance,
right,
then these are things to talk to your development partners about for sure. Okay, basic accessibility, not often or not as often as it should be thought of as a performance issue, but it absolutely is a performance issue. It's good for accessibility, it's good for your website performance, it's good for Google. All of these things link. And when I talk about accessibility with clients, I try and sort of wrap that conversation into broader conversations around performance and just better user experience. An accessible experience is a better experience for everybody, not just people
right,
who might be browsing the web using alternative technologies. Image alt tags is the most commonly found sort of feature of a website accessibility. And the purpose of an alt tag is to describe the image it's showing, or the image that is being shown. And originally it's set up purely for screen readers. The original HTML specification says it's for screen readers, but it serves a great purpose for search as well. You can add these alt tags that describe the image. So you could say, here's a picture from our 2022 fundraising event in Boston, or whatever it is, right? So you can describe the image, and it helps people who cannot see that image understand what was being shown. And an interesting point actually is for decorative images. Sometimes you might have images on the site that don't actually serve a purpose. I would still add in an alt tag and just say decorative image, because otherwise the screen reader might trip up on it. It can create confusion, and just say decorative image, right? So it doesn't matter if there's nothing there. It should still have an alt tag. Descriptive links. This is a real personal bugbear of mine, actually. It's when I see websites that say, click here to view blah, 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 or, want to learn more, click here. And that click here is not helping anybody because it doesn't describe what the next thing is. So it is far better to have a link that says, you can learn more about our campaign here, and link the words more about our campaign or something to the actual page, rather than click here to learn more about our campaign. So if you can include descriptive text in the links, that is better for all users, but it's also much better for screen readers, users with disability, because they can understand what is happening next better. And to go with that, links have an attribute called a title, which is similar to an image alt tag, so that when you hover over that link, you can get a little pop-up that says some text. I would always use those and help sort of, give an idea of the future content, give an idea of what is happening after you have clicked. Real simple, basic stuff. And if you're using a CMS like WordPress, you can add those in yourself as you go. Talk to your development partner, they can add those in. But yeah, just real simple stuff to make your site more accessible. Finally, keyboard accessibility. If you try testing your site without using your keyboard, can somebody access all the main areas of your site? Can they navigate through the tabs along the top? If you've got bulky drop-down menus, can they get to those without using a mouse or another pointing device? That's a big it's a big issue, is because sometimes you can tab your way through the main navigation, but it never drops down to that the drop-down menu, right? So try navigating your site without using a mouse or a pointing device. I guarantee you will learn something. Things like one of my pet peeves with it is forms. When people have generated forms, and in the editing of them, they might have moved fields around, they might have changed around, and it makes perfect sense why they would do that. But then at the end of it, what is called their tab order has changed, so you can no longer tab in a sensible order through the form. So it's just little bits like that. And again, talk to your partner about it. If you're having difficulty navigating your site with the keyboard only, yeah, definitely worth a conversation. All right, that's that one. Oh, SEO, everybody's favorite.
Yes, big buzzword.
The big buzzword, right. I'm going to try and keep this, I think I'm taking up too much time. I'm going to try and keep this snappy. So, page structure, mix of headings. If we go back, if you think back to Dylan's slide about scanning and scannability of a page, the optimum setup was with this mix of heading sizes. And you would characterize those as heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, where each of those have different sort of consistent attributes. All of the heading 2s are the same font size, all of your heading 3s, same color, same font size, whatever. When you're constructing your page, both for scannability but also for search, it's great to be able to use that full range of heading tags, and they go all the way down to heading 6. Use a good range of them so that you're telling Google that this page is now split into sections of equal weight, of equal importance. So sections that are headed with an H2 should be treated the same way, and sections heading with an H3 should be treated the same way as others. And it just gives that nice sort of structure to the page that is good for readability, but also for search engines. Content depth. This is one I really like to talk about, so I will do my best to restrict myself. I think of creating content in terms of little micro communities almost around a topic. So if I'm building out a big site, I ask what are the main topic areas, and we might identify 5 or 6. We say, okay, well, we'll have a landing page for each of those 5 or 6. And then that landing page can summarize everything that sits beneath it. So there might be 5 or 6 things beneath that landing page. And so then those 5 or 6 things link off to their own pages, and you're just sort of developing this decent structure in the same way that your individual page is scannable. Your content structure becomes scannable as well. So you're saying, this is my cornerstone content. This is the content that speaks most to my audience. And then here are the sub-pages within that. And it just gives the site just a solid infrastructure. It's like the architecture of a house. It's just a solid setup. And then it comes into the final point here about internal linking. Whenever you're generating content, whenever you are creating these cornerstone pages and their sub-pages, you should be looking for opportunities to link from one page to another. So in the same way that the whole of the internet, the whole of the World Wide Web is connected through links, your site is as well, and it is the way that Google will naturally travel through your site. Okay, so it'll read your text, it'll find a link, it'll go follow that link and see where it goes. And it'll be making judgments as to whether that is a sensible place for it to have gone, or whether it isn't. So if you've got a post on a fundraising opportunity that you're talking about now, and it's similar to something that happened last year, or it's relevant to something that happened last week, you could be looking for opportunities to link those posts together or those pages together, right? And it just provides that sort of richness. You're sort of creating this flow of relevant and related content for users. Okay, how are we doing for time?
Not good.
Okay.
But that's all right.
All right. SEO, go local. Google business profiles. Get your charity, get your non-profit listed on Google by setting up they used to be called Google My Business. It's now Google Business Profile. Gives you great levels of community engagement. You can engage with people who leave reviews. It gives you the chance to publish images and blog posts on Google. And really what you're doing is you are getting more space on Google for free. So if you're not doing it, do it. Local site schema. This is information structured locally structured around your local content in such a way that Google wants to eat it up, right? So it's structuring the content to say, well, these are our opening hours. This is where we are. This is where we are on the map. And that way you have the opportunity to show up in more and more different types of Google searching, right? Okay. Next one then. Let me scan through this. Learn to love your console. Yeah. So everyone, I know, I'm getting the fun stuff.
Yeah, you are.
So Google Console contains so much information, right? If you're not able to check your Google Console on the regular, even sort of monthly, you're missing out on a ton of stuff. The most useful stuff, as far as I'm concerned, is the keyword insights. It'll help show you what phrases and what search terms people are using to find your website. And you can then get a picture of where maybe your content is lacking. If you're getting a lot of searches in one sort of content area, but they're all coming to one page, maybe you've got 3 or 4 pages you can make out of that, you know. So you can use that information to figure out what might be missing on your website and develop a content strategy around those keyword insights. Crawler errors, a really useful early warning system for problems on your website. If Google isn't able to find all the pages or is having problem retrieving the pages, gives you quick actionable tips on how to fix those. Sitemap submission. Help Google find the content that is most relevant and update it regularly. So I talked a little bit about how Google goes from link to link and follows the flow of your site. In order to help Google at the most basic level, submitting a sitemap which says these are all the pages, these are all the blog posts, these are all of everything, all of the events and whatever, is just a great thing. Google's just going to go, oh, well, thank you for saving me all that work. Here's all the pages, right? And in that sitemap, you can tell them which sections are most likely to be updated most frequently. So your events page might be updated most frequently, your news page, your home page, and so on. And it just, anything you can do to kind of help Google out will endear you to it.
That's what we want.
Yeah, right. All right. You'll be glad to know I've only got 3 more things to talk about really quickly. Readability. Okay, so we're talking about your content. Readability scores. If you have the opportunity, there is a usability score called the Flesch-Kincaid test or the Flesch Reading Ease scale. The Flesch-Kincaid score is a grade-based system, and as I say, well, the writing on your website is suitable for grade 10. I'm not familiar actually with US grade systems, but it gives you that sort of basis to say your website is readable to different age groups, and it will help you understand whether you are caught up in talking too technically, caught up in talking jargon that maybe is very well known within your group, but maybe not so much to the people you're talking to. So always useful to run it through one of those tests. When we talk about tone of voice, are you speaking the language of the people you are talking to? And that can vary through your site. So ideally, you've got a set of brand values that sit up here and sort of dictate how you represent yourselves as an organization. And then those brand values filter down into talking to donors, talking to trusts, talking to individuals, talking to community groups, and there's all the different groups of people that you're talking to on the website. It needs to be consistent with the brand values, but it needs to be consistent also with the people you're talking to. Are they going to understand and relate to the tone of voice you're using?
Right.
Organize your content. Okay, I can skip that because we talked about that in sitemaps and scannability and all of that. I am done, Dylan.
Well, yeah, David, you did have some tough material to go through. So
the dry stuff, that's okay.
I get to do stuff. I do get to do the fun stuff at the beginning and the end. So I'll owe you one.
I like all of that stuff. It's all good.
I'm sure. Yes. So now we're talking about donation. So obviously this is specifically around the lens of nonprofits. The first tip that I can recommend is a friction assessment. This is just basically a checklist that allows you to, it just basically runs through, and we'll provide the links to this, as David mentioned, but it kind of runs you through a list of criteria that you evaluate your donation experience against, and then it gives you a grade. And this isn't for the grade that this is super useful. It's for the questions that it asks you, really makes you think about the kind of donation experience that you're presenting, right? And so it kind of goes through finding and loading. It goes through options that you provide your users. It goes through, form fields. And so I highly recommend going through, performing a friction assessment. And real quick, friction, when I'm using that term, I mean, that's the force that's stopping people from taking the desired action that you'd like them to take on your website, right? So it slows them down and then potentially eventually stops them. So you want to think of limiting friction as the goal here. So a friction assessment, that's a great place to start to understand how to improve your donation experience. Productize your donations. I love this. I don't see this enough. But I love when nonprofits tie a donation level to an outcome. Whereas, today, in most of the organizations we see, it's like, just give us some money, a few different options. Here's a few different options of money. Why don't you give that to us? We're not going to be very clear about exactly what you're getting for it. It's not a very consumer focused experience, right? Whereas, most people shop online, most people buy products online. They see what they're getting for something, they see the price, they transact. That's a low friction scenario. If you want to try and kind of leverage some of that behavior and some of that familiarity for the kind of the social sector, you got to find a way to turn your donations into products. So, which can be challenging because you have to find out how to measure and quantify impact based on dollars, but it's super powerful. Every time I'm with my donor hat exploring different nonprofits, and I see kind of easy to engage with donor products, I'm typically much more likely to actually give. So productize your donations, reduce form fields. So there's this notion in the social sector that when you're processing a donation, you need to know first name, last name, second cousin, vacation home, the list of questions never ends, right? And that creates a ton of friction. That's one of the biggest sources of friction, is just the number of fields that you're presenting your users with, so your visitors with. So if you can find a way to limit, either limiting the fields, which is you don't necessarily need to know the full address. You don't necessarily need to have their phone number. People, I talk to a lot of people who the second a site asks them for their phone number, they stop, right? So there's all these questions that you can probably eliminate. And then also you can combine, for example, first name, last name, and then also consider steps. So instead of asking all the questions at once, if you have to ask a lot of questions, ask a few and then make it a step-based donation experience instead of a one long form, because we've all been staring down the tunnel of a long form and lost interest. Whereas steps, it's it's a couple of interactions, new screen, couple of interactions, new screen. All of a sudden, you might have answered all the same questions, but it didn't feel like as much work. So try and reduce your form fields or shift to a step-based process. Don't skip the thank you page. It's incredible how you get this visitor who loves what you do and they're super interested and they're all right, I give. They do everything you want them to do. And then the donation, the thank you page sometimes gets ignored, right? So if you can find a way to craft a personalized thank you page, in this case, this is for Charity Water. They know exactly how much I gave. They use my name, and then they give me an opportunity to stay connected, right? So there's an additional kind of connection point. And also it kind of, it showed a transition from a state of kind of a negative state, whereas the imagery at the donation screen and throughout the site was more of a negative state. Here are these people who don't have access to clean drinking water. Then they have the positive imagery on the thank you page. It shows the positive state, and it kind of just highlights the transition, the journey, the that is the product, right? It's I gave. Here's the positive state. It's these subtle little psychological, emotional, journeys that we go through that Charity Water, does a good job capitalizing on. So don't skip on the thank you page. It can be tempting to kind of just, we got the donation. That's the whole thing. Let's move on. No, take some time. Try and really, make people come back. Donor retention. And then also this one is orphan your donation page. So when we say orphan, we mean removing all the links, all the main navigation links, right? So when those are called orphan pages. And because they feel like they're kind of alone out there, they're not attached to the same navigation that maybe the rest of the pages on the site are. And this is another example from Charity Water, where instead of on the donation page, you have all of these distracting links, right? Where you can you give people too many options to navigate away from what you want them to do, right? So let me go look back at the stories or some videos, or let me click on their Instagram feed and go check out what they're doing on their social profiles. Remove all those options, right? Like, you got them to the donation page. Remove any friction by removing all of the links that are available. And this just kind of gives them one thing they can do. But obviously sign in is the other one. But in this case, they've really removed a lot of these other links. And so do that. You'll be able to, you're going to give people less of a chance to kind of bounce off and go elsewhere. Kind of guides them more down the process. So that's it. That's all the tips. And I know that was a crash course. We have about 1 minute and 30 seconds left in the 40 minutes that we promised. David, any parting wisdom for us?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of bits there that you talked about that I thought I would just pick up on really quickly around those long forms, right? And you're making the excellent point about breaking it into steps and so on. The reason I think that organizations like those long forms is that it's coming from a place of fear, that they're worried, they're thinking, we've got them now, we've got to get everything.
Right.
And that's just not true at all. It's like, you've got them now, and you can nurture that relationship. You can find out who their second cousin is on their fourth email.
Right.
So they need to let go of that fear and just say, it's okay. Well, this is the start of a relationship. It isn't a census form. Then what I would also add to the thank you pages wisdom that you had, as you know, Dylan, we spent a lot of time in the commercial sector before we sort of made this switch to charities and non-profits.
Right.
What we found with a lot of e-commerce sites is that the thank you page was also the best converting sales page. So if we sold, or if a client had sold like a $10 widget, and we went through the order process and thank you, and on that thank you page where they're feeling really good about their purchase and their widget's on its way and it's all good, then you were saying, well, okay, for another $10 you could have a different widget, and that page, that thank you, was one of the best converting sales pages in the whole process. It's so easy, and you could easily do that with donations. You could easily say, Dylan, thank you for your $10. Another $10 would feed half a dozen people, whatever it is.
Right.
And most people will go, "No, that's okay. I've given my $10. That's no problem." They won't be offended to be given the opportunity to give again.
Right. Yes, I've written extensively on the parallels between and what can nonprofits learn from the e-commerce sector, right? Because the people who donate online are also people who shop online. We're the same people. We're just kind of in different hats at different times. And so, and there's a law in design that's called the law of familiarity, and it's people develop pattern expectations based on their behavior. And so you have all these people who are used to these e-commerce experiences, and then if they're taking that same, experience to a nonprofit website, and if the delta in terms of quality or thoughtfulness between the nonprofit website and the e-commerce website is too great, if the difference is too great, it really is stark. So our goal is to try and merge those two experiences to try and take the best of the e-commerce world, which is those things like the productized donations, the sleek checkout experiences, the thank you pages, take those learnings and apply them to the nonprofit sector, which is possible. I mean, you are still selling a product at the end of the day, people are still exchanging their money for an outcome, for something. It's just something they don't necessarily touch or see, which makes it even more important that you deliver an exceptional experience, not less important. So, so anything else for us, David?
No, that's good. I think I've exhausted my knowledge for 40 minutes.
I think we crammed a lot in.
There's a lot.
We hope it was valuable. And if you have any questions, you can reach David on LinkedIn. David Horn from Ethical Digital Studio, and Dylan. I'm Dylan Steven from 118 Group. And we'll have all sorts of links available with the recording. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Adios.